The chandelier above me trembled, its crystal prisms catching the candlelight, like a warning I should have heeded. I stood at the edge of the grand dining hall in my family's Seattle estate, the air thick with the scent of roasted lamb and old money. My heels sank into the Persian rug, and my black silk dress felt like armor. Sharp, tailored, but not enough to shield me from the laughter that sliced through the room. My sister, Victoria, leaned back in her chair, her diamond earrings glinting as she tossed her head back, laughing at something my brother Nathan had just said. "You'll always be beneath us, Sophia," he'd sneered, his voice carrying over the clink of wine glasses. The guests, senators, CEOs, and tech moguls, chuckled politely, their eyes sliding past me like I was a ghost at my own family's gala. I gripped the stem of my water glass, my knuckles whitening, and told myself to breathe. I wasn't here for them. I was here for me, for closure, for the last time. The invitation had arrived a week ago, heavy ivory cardstock embossed with gold, screaming the kind of pretension my mother Claire lived for. A celebration of the Bennett family legacy, it read, honoring our contributions to Washington's civic elite. Translation, my father, Richard, wanted to parade his golden children, Victoria and Nathan, before his old money friends. I wasn't one of them. Never had been. The envelope had sat on my kitchen counter in my modest Capitol Hill apartment for 2 days, unopened, mocking me. I'd nearly tossed it into the trash, right next to the coffee grounds and a wilted bouquet from a colleague's retirement party. But at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, I'd fished it out, smoothed its creases, and decided to come. Not for Victoria's curated social media posts or Nathan's smug grin, for me to prove I could face them and walk away whole. The estate hadn't changed in the decades since I'd last stood here. The stone lions still guarded the circular driveway, their marble eyes cold and unyielding. The hedges were clipped with military precision, and the air carried that same sterile chill I remembered from childhood. I'd driven up the winding road in silence, my rented sedan humming softly as bare-limbed trees loomed against the gray March sky. The door opened before I knocked, revealing Maria, the housekeeper, her face as unreadable as ever. "Miss Sophia," she said, stepping aside without a smile. I nodded, remembering her name, though she didn't linger to chat. Inside, the hallway was a museum of wealth, polished oak, soft jazz from hidden speakers, and trays of champagne floating past on gloved hands. No one turned to greet me. No one noticed. I stood there, coat still on, watching Victoria's voice cut through the crowd before I saw her face. She was laughing about some tech gala in San Francisco where her husband Ethan had apparently shared a cigar with a Silicon Valley titan. "The governor was there too," she said, her voice dripping with pride. I waited just for a moment to see if anyone would acknowledge me. They didn't. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to move forward, scanning the dining table. Names were printed in delicate cursive on cream cards. Victoria, Nathan, Claire, Richard, Senator Hayes. No Sophia. Maria appeared again, holding a plain gray napkin, nothing like the embroidered ones with the Bennett crest. "I believe this is yours," she said, placing it on a chair without a card. Her eyes flickered, pity, maybe, or recognition. I sat, smoothed the napkin across my lap, and pressed its corners down slowly, swallowing the sting. My mother had perfected this kind of exclusion, subtle, deniable, but sharp as a blade. Victoria's voice broke through again. "Oh, Sophia, you made it after all." Her smile was all teeth, never reaching her eyes. "Still in Seattle? Or was it Portland?" "D.C.," I corrected, my voice steady. "For 4 years now?" She nodded vaguely, already turning back to Ethan. "He just got named to the Tech Ethics Board. You should have seen the crowd at the announcement. Cameras everywhere." Nathan chuckled, tipping his glass toward her. Must be nice to have a real job. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it hit like a slap. I didn't flinch. I reached for my water, the gray napkin brushing my wrist like a reminder of my place, or lack of it. Then it happened. The chandelier above shuddered again, a low groan echoing from its mount. I froze, my eyes darting upward as a single crystal prism broke free, plummeting toward the table. It missed me by inches, shattering on the floor in a spray of glass that silenced the room. Guests gasped, chairs scraped, and Victoria's hand flew to her chest. "My God," she whispered, but her eyes weren't on the chandelier. They were on me, sharp and accusing as if I'd willed it to fall. I didn't move, didn't speak, just held her gaze until she looked away. The staff rushed in, sweeping up the shards, and the moment passed, but the air felt heavier, electric with something unspoken. A woman in a red dress leaned toward me, her smile too bright. "What do you do, Sophia?" Before I could answer, Claire cut in, her tone breezy. "She's always been private, something with legal work." The woman blinked. "Legal work?" "Exactly," Claire said, her ring catching the light as she sipped her wine. "We've always supported our children's choices." I stared at her hand, remembering how it used to pull me behind her in public when someone asked if I was adopted. The memory burned, but I kept my face neutral, my fingers pressing the gray napkin harder into my thighs. Then came the second danger. A faint rustle under the table caught my ear, a soft slither against the rug. My heart skipped as I glanced down, catching the glint of scales in the dim light. A venomous snake, its head raised, inches from my ankle. My breath caught, but I didn't scream. I slid my chair back slowly, my movements deliberate, and stamped my heel hard on the floor. The snake recoiled, vanishing under the tablecloth as a server's footfalls startled it away. No one else noticed. Victoria was too busy whispering to Ethan, and Nathan was pouring more wine, oblivious. I exhaled, my pulse racing, but I kept my composure, my hand steady on the napkin. The door to the dining room swung open, sudden and deliberate. A young staffer rushed in, cheeks flushed. "Apologies," he stammered. "Judge Carter has just arrived." The room stilled. Richard lowered his glass, mid-toast, his jaw tightening. Claire blinked twice, her wine glass frozen in midair. Nathan muttered, "He wasn't supposed to come till dessert." But I didn't move. I didn't need to look. I knew who was coming. Judge Carter's footsteps echoed, calm and measured, like a man who owned every room he entered. He didn't glance at Richard or the guests, didn't acknowledge the hand-stitched centerpiece Victoria had bragged about ordering from a boutique in Manhattan. He stopped at my side, his voice clear and deliberate. "Your Honor," he said, looking directly at me, "thank you for waiting." The words landed like a thunderclap. Richard's molars clicked, audible in the silence. A spoon clattered to the floor. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. Carter approached with the grace of a man used to silencing crowds. "My apologies, Judge Bennett," he said, ignoring everyone else. There was a delay leaving chambers. Claire blinked so fast I thought she'd short-circuit. "Wait, you know our daughter?" she asked, her tone caught between confusion and embarrassment. Carter's smile was polite but sharp. "Know her? Ma'am, your daughter authored the Grayson decision last year, a national precedent in corporate tax fraud. Some of us are still catching up." Nathan let out a low, awkward chuckle. "Grayson? That was the big tax case, right?" Victoria didn't speak, just stared into her Pinot Noir, swirling it like she could drown the moment in her glass. Carter didn't wait for them to recover. "I'd like her seated here," he said, gesturing to the empty chair at the head of the table. "It's where she belongs." A server slipped in, pushing an upholstered chair identical to the others, and another replaced my gray napkin with a white, embroidered one. the Bennett crest shimmering in the light. I stared at it, then folded it neatly beside my plate, keeping the gray one on my lap. That one was mine. Richard hadn't spoken, but I saw the veins in his neck pulse, a sheen of sweat above his brow. Victoria found her voice, thin and sharp. "Since when are you a judge?" I met her eyes, calm but unyielding. 4 years now," Nathan laughed, short and forced. "Wait, like a real federal judge with a courtroom and a gavel?" Carter raised an eyebrow. "She's a United States District Judge, Mr. Bennett. She presides over federal and constitutional law. Yes, that includes gavels." The third danger came as I stood to step outside for air. The balcony railing, ornate and heavy, gave way under my touch, splintering with a crack that echoed across the terrace. I stumbled back, my heart lurching as I caught myself against the wall, the drop to the garden below looming dark and jagged. Maria appeared, her eyes wide, and pulled me back inside without a word. "Faulty wood," she muttered, but her glance toward Victoria's retreating figure said otherwise. I brushed off my dress, my hands steady despite the adrenaline, and returned to the dining room. Carter leaned toward me, his voice low. "No need to perform, Sophia. You've already earned your standing." His words grounded me, a reminder of who I was, not to them, but to myself. I picked up my glass, stood and waited for the murmurs to fade. "To the truth," I said, my voice even but firm. "It arrives late, but always on time." The silence that followed was solid, unbreakable, a moment no one could spin or dismiss. Richard cleared his throat. Claire looked away. No one challenged the toast. The fourth danger struck as I left the estate. My car's brakes felt soft, then failed entirely as I rounded a sharp curve on the coastal road. I downshifted, my hands gripping the wheel, and guided the car onto a gravel shoulder just before it could plunge into the ravine below. My pulse thundered, but I didn't panic. I called a tow truck, my voice calm, and waited in the dark, the ocean's roar a distant echo of my own resolve. Back in the dining room before I'd left, a young woman approached, her eyes bright with recognition. "You're Judge Bennett from the Pierce ruling, right?" I nodded. "I read your opinion 3 times in law school. It changed everything for me." Her words warmed me, not with pride, but with peace. The kind that comes when someone sees your work, not your name. Claire's voice cut in from behind, performative and confused. "The Pierce case?" I didn't answer. For the first time, I let her question hang, unanswered, in the air she'd built around me for years. The 5th danger came later that night, back in my apartment. A faint hiss from the ceiling vent alerted me to a rigged electrical spark, a fire hazard wired to ignite. I cut the power, called maintenance, and stood in the dark, my breath steady. Someone wanted me silenced, but I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't sleep much that night. The gala's echoes, Victoria's laughter, Nathan's sneer, Claire's calculated ignorance, played on a loop, but so did Carter's voice, calling me Your Honor. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the city lights through my window. I'd come for closure, but what I found was something sharper, a reckoning. The gray napkin, still folded in my bag, was a reminder. They'd tried to erase me, but I'd written my own story, and it was only beginning. The morning after the gala, I woke to the faint hum of Seattle's dawn, the city stirring beyond my apartment window. My coffee mug steamed on the counter, its chipped blue rim a relic from law school days, when I'd survived on grit and caffeine. The gray napkin from the night before lay folded on my desk, a silent witness to the family I'd faced and the reckoning that had begun. I hadn't planned to unravel them so publicly, but Judge Carter's entrance, his voice cutting through their laughter like a blade, had shifted something irreversible. My phone buzzed incessantly. Texts, emails, voicemails piling up like debris after a storm. I ignored them all. I had a case to prep for, a federal docket that didn't care about family drama or chandeliers that nearly crushed me. But the weight of last night clung to me, heavy as the fog rolling off Puget Sound. I sipped my coffee, black and bitter, and opened my laptop. A colleague's email blinked at the top of my inbox. Subject line, "You're viral." Attached was a link to a news clip, already at 50,000 views. I clicked, my stomach tightening. There was Victoria perched on a sleek white sofa in a local TV studio, her smile polished to a sheen. The chyron read, "Big sister to DC's rising star judge, Victoria Langley opens up." The host leaned in, all teeth and enthusiasm. "You must be so proud. What's it like seeing your little sister in the headlines?" Victoria's laugh was soft, practiced. Sophia's always been ambitious. I used to help her with applications, walk her through interview questions. Family always comes first. Our parents instilled that in us. I nearly choked on my coffee. Family first. The lie was so bold it bordered on art. I'd sat alone at my law school graduation, no family in sight, no applause from them, just the hum of strangers' cheers. Victoria had changed her number after our fight over the family trust, cutting me off for 2 years. She'd once told a mutual friend I wasn't media-friendly enough for public roles. The clip cut to photos. A family barbecue where she'd photoshopped herself closer to me, cropping out her ex-husband. A childhood snapshot of us on swings, but she'd chosen the one where I looked startled, mid-blink. Worst of all, a scan of my clerkship letter from Judge Lawson, except the signature was wrong. She'd used a draft I'd deleted, forging her own narrative. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, rage simmering but controlled. I didn't respond to the clip. Instead, I opened a folder labeled "If Ever Needed." Inside were receipts, literal and metaphorical. Emails where Victoria had bad-mouthed me to colleagues, including one where she asked a friend to suggest I withdraw from a fellowship because it didn't fit her image. Text messages she'd sent to a professor claiming I was emotionally unstable. A rerouted email where she'd posed as my assistant to reschedule my clerkship interview, hoping I'd miss it. I'd shown up anyway, confused but determined, and landed the role. These weren't grudges. They were evidence. I scheduled a call with the federal court's PR team, my voice calm but firm. By noon, they released a digital press kit, 5 PDFs, no fanfare. The first was my clerkship offer letter, Judge Lawson's handwritten note clear. "You earned this all on your own, Sophia. Be proud." Another was the email chain exposing Victoria's impersonation attempt. The last was her text to my professor, time-stamped 2 weeks before my judicial nomination. Screenshots don't lie when metadata backs them up. By evening, "She Stood Alone" was trending. A former classmate posted a photo of us in the law library, my arms laden with textbooks. She carried 3 books and a protein bar, no help from anyone. We all knew. Another wrote, "Funny how the ones who erased her now want to rewrite her story." Victoria's Instagram vanished by midnight, her LinkedIn locked. The internet doesn't forgive a liar caught on camera. The first new danger came that afternoon. I was crossing the street to my office when a black SUV swerved too close, its tires screeching as it missed me by inches. I stumbled onto the sidewalk, my briefcase skidding across the pavement. The driver didn't stop, the tinted windows hiding their face. My heart pounded, but I didn't scream. I memorized the license plate, texted it to a colleague, and kept walking, my heels clicking against the concrete. Someone was sending a message, but I wasn't backing down. Back in my office, my assistant Lena burst in, waving an email printout. "Senator Brooks' team wants you in D.C. tomorrow." Her eyes were wide, her voice breathless. "The ethics committee, Sophia. They're naming you chair." I blinked, once, twice, then closed my laptop. The call wasn't a surprise. I'd been tipped off by Carter's aide at the gala, but the urgency was. I didn't pack right away. There was one stop I needed to make first, one loose end to tie before I stepped into that hearing room. The drive to the Bennett family's coastal mansion in Oregon took 3 hours, the road winding through pine forests and cliffs that dropped into the Pacific. The estate looked smaller than I remembered, its grandeur dulled by time, or maybe by my own clarity. The lights were dim, only a few glowing through the front windows, casting amber streaks across the marble floor. I let myself in, my key still fitting the lock after all these years. No one greeted me. The air was thick with silence, perfumed with the faint scent of Claire's lavender candles, an unspoken regret. I walked to the study, my heels echoing down the corridor. Richard sat at the walnut table, glasses low on his nose, legal pads and folders scattered like a battlefield. He didn't flinch when I entered, just looked up and folded his hands. "They're coming after the company," he said, his voice gravelly. "And your mother. We need your help." No hello, no apology. I stood there, letting his words hang, heavy as the fog outside. He gestured to a chair, as if this were still his game, his rules. I didn't sit. Instead, I rested my hand on the table's edge. "Is this about the charity filings?" I asked, my tone neutral but sharp. He didn't answer, but his silence was enough. The documents trembled in his hands, betraying the stress carved into his face. I remembered the first time this came up, 7 years ago, just after I passed the bar. Richard had invited me to dinner, just us, a rare occurrence. Halfway through, he slid an envelope across the table. An affidavit claiming the family's charitable donations were properly filed. I'd read every line, my stomach turning at the words. Misappropriation, fraud, intentional deception. I'd refused to sign, not with anger, but with quiet resolve. "I won't clean up what I didn't spill," I'd said, standing to leave. A week later, Victoria took my place in D.C., signing what I wouldn't. Now, here we were again, but I wasn't that young lawyer anymore. I pulled a sealed folder from my coat and laid it on the table. Richard reached for it, but I held firm. "It's all in here," I said. "Falsified deductions, fabricated grant records, names, signatures, timestamps." His jaw clenched. "You always kept everything," he muttered. "Always 10 steps ahead." "I wasn't protecting you," I replied. "I was protecting myself." He looked at me then, really looked, his eyes searching for something he'd missed all those years. I let the folder slide from my fingers and stepped back. Claire entered, her hair perfect, makeup flawless, a diplomat in a crumbling empire. "No apology?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She didn't blink. "If you care about this family, you'll handle this quietly. You have the credentials, the respect. You could make this disappear." Her words were a blade, sharp and familiar. "That's what you think I am," I said. "A cleaner with a title," she snapped. "We gave you everything, the name, the education." I cut her off. "You gave me a spotlight when it suited you, shadows when it didn't." Richard rose, slow, as if standing could reclaim his authority. "You're still one of us." "No," I said, my voice steady as stone. "I'm what happens when your version of us fails." The silence was deafening. I pushed the folder toward the table's center. "I won't destroy you, but I won't save you either." Claire's lip curled. "You'd let us drown?" "I'm letting the tide rise," I said. "What it pulls in or spares isn't up to me." I turned to leave, then paused. "My name's clean. I'll notify the board I recuse myself from any defense tied to blood." That was all I owed them. The second danger came as I left the mansion. A shadow moved in the driveway, a figure in a hooded jacket tampering with my car. I froze, my keys clutched tight, and shouted, "Hey!" The figure bolted into the pines, leaving a wrench glinting on the gravel. I checked the car. Lug nuts loosened on the front wheel, a deliberate sabotage. My hands shook as I tightened them with a spare tool from the trunk, but my mind stayed clear. Someone wanted me off the board, out of D.C., out of their way. I drove off, the ocean roaring beside me, my resolve hardening with every mile. In D.C., the Capitol building loomed under a golden hour glow, its dome a silent witness to the storm I was about to walk into. My driver eased through the security gate and I clutched my folder, not because I needed to review it, but because it anchored me. A young staffer, barely 25, met me at the rotunda, her badge askew. "Judge Bennett," she said, breathless. "They're ready for you." The hearing room was understated, muted blue seats, a modest dais, cameras humming soft. I scanned the room. Victoria sat in the back, arms crossed, legs tucked tightly. Richard was beside her, his face unreadable, a man trying to control a hurricane. I took my seat, the gavel echoing once. Senator Brooks stood, tapping the mic. "This panel is now chaired by Judge Sophia Bennett, Federal Judicial Ethics Advisory Council." The room applauded politely, flashes popping. Victoria shifted, her fingers twitching. Richard's jaw ticked. I leaned toward the mic. "Thank you. Before we begin, I want to address something foundational. Ethics isn't just codes or clauses. It's what you do when no one's watching, when it's just you and the choice." The camera zoomed in. I continued. "My mentor, Judge Eleanor Hart, said the measure of our power is how we protect the powerless. Today, that includes accountability among our own." Victoria blinked hard. I pressed on. "I've reviewed materials on grant misallocations tied to charitable initiatives. We won't politicize wrongdoing, but we won't bury it either." I didn't name them. The documents were on record. The third danger came mid-hearing. A courier delivered a sealed envelope to my desk marked urgent. I opened it, my pulse quickening. A handwritten note: "Drop the charity probe or your apartment's next." No signature, but the paper smelled faintly of Claire's lavender perfume. I folded it, slipped it into my folder, and kept speaking, my voice steady. I wouldn't be intimidated. The journalist from the Washington Ledger took the floor, her earpiece glinting. "Mr. Bennett," she said, addressing Richard directly, "is it true Judge Bennett raised concerns about your foundation's tax filings years before this investigation?" Silence. Richard's head turned slowly, his eyes heavy. "Yes," he said finally. "Judge Bennett did." The room froze, cameras still. I didn't look at him. His admission was for them, not me. The vote was unanimous, hands raised across the dais. "Congratulations, Chairwoman Bennett," Brooks said, standing. Outside, reporters swarmed, their questions sharp. "Judge Bennett, does your appointment signal that silence no longer protects families? Will you recuse yourself from the charity litigation tied to your father's company?" I didn't answer, walking through the noise to the waiting car. Inside, the air was cool, the world muffled. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You've made your point. Come home, let's talk." No name, no punctuation. I turned the phone over and told the driver, "Keep going." The fourth danger struck on the drive back. A truck veered into my lane, its headlights blinding. My driver swerved, tires screeching, and we skidded onto the shoulder, gravel spraying. My heart raced, but I stayed calm, checking the folder, still in my lap. "Get us out of here," I told the driver. He nodded, pulling back onto the highway. Someone was desperate to stop me, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I dozed off past midnight, the highway's hum lulling me into a restless sleep. When I woke, the sky was pale pink, the car slowing at a cliffside driveway in Maine. The air smelled of salt and pine, mist curling over jagged rocks. The driver handed me the keys and left without a word. The cabin was mine, bought through a blind trust months ago, a sanctuary I'd planned as an escape. Its wood-paneled walls and stone fireplace were simple, grounding. I made coffee on the gas stove, the cedar scent mixing with the ocean's breath. The fifth danger came that evening. A faint creak on the deck woke me from a nap, my journal still open on my lap. I grabbed a fireplace poker and stepped outside, my breath visible in the cold. Footprints marred the damp wood, leading to the cliff's edge. No one was there, but a knife lay abandoned, its blade glinting in the moonlight. I locked the doors, my heart steady but alert. They could try to scare me, but I was done running. 3 weeks had passed since D.C. Headlines trickled in despite my avoidance. Bennett Holdings faces federal probe. Ethics Committee audits charity. Daughter rises as family falls. Someone had leaked documents, not me. The truth didn't need my help. Victoria's talk show appearance, her lies unraveling under scrutiny, went viral. Her twitching smile betrayed her. Richard's email, "We need to speak," went to trash. Victoria's 5 FaceTime attempts were blocked. Claire posted a cryptic photo of daisies with a caption about regret. I didn't read it twice. I journaled instead, my leather-bound book a space to claim my story. On the first page I wrote, "They didn't break me. They named me wrong, but I named myself." The fire crackled as dusk fell, embers glowing like breath. A white envelope sat on my desk, addressed in my handwriting. To the family that taught me what not to become. I tucked it into a drawer with old maps and seashells. Not sending it was mercy, not weak. I whispered to the air, "This chapter ends with me." Outside, the ocean crashed, waves returning without permission. I sat on the deck, my sweater pulled tight, the wicker chair creaking under me. The sky flared orange and violet, colors melting into a sigh. The breeze pushed against my collarbone, but I didn't flinch. Silence wasn't absence anymore. It was choice, and I chose it.